because what you're talking about sounds like unionization, and unionization still ends up through human error with one person or a group of people who are able to control the resources and the financials. So that makes me feel like we'll end up back in the same situation. I think that if you're going to really address corporate welfare, you got to think about why do we have it? And we have it when society or an emergency or something has failed and we need to sustain the public. So what happens when it's not something that just continues on? Because that's been our problem. We instate these things, we instate these, like Charlie was saying, we instate these things that need to happen for that moment, and we never come back and revisit it. We never come back and say, is this still appropriate for now? So I would think that when you talk about corporate welfare and you talk about when what they get money to do certain things, which is absolutely necessary in a democracy. You can't have democracy where you just have the government doing stuff. You want to outsource it to companies, but you also want to be smart about the length, how long it goes. You want to control those factors that you guys spoke about earlier.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask for last comments on this since we're coming to the end. Any last comments on this corporate welfare issue?
Go ahead.
Karen, go ahead.
To Vince's point, look at farm subsidies. They started in the Great Depression, and they're still going. And now most of it goes into corn. Only 9% of corn is eaten by people. The rest goes into ethanol and feed for animals and for other products you make for it. So it's not really, our money's not going into food that's good for you, vegetables and proteins. It's going into large carbohydrates, which ends up in chips and all sorts of other things. Half of the stuff that's for edible actually is for high fructose corn syrup. So we essentially have 4% that's being paid for any kind of food that people actually eat. So things like that, and I think Vince had a great point. We need to look at it and not just say, well, Iowa is the first state where everybody wants to be president, so we better subsidize corn. We need to be able to step back and look at why we do things.
All right, Karen.
My issue is how and why is it that major corporations are allowed to be priority when you say that these loans, grants are for the little people? Why are they allowed to be first? And should there be a way to determine who gets funding on a scale or whatever, however it should be done, but it should be done equally amongst all and not just major corporations. Again, most of the corporations that got the PPP loan with the PPP loans still paid out bonuses. A lot of them made profits during the pandemic. Yep. So why did you need it? Like Amy said, there were people who during the pandemic last year, they were told because of the pandemic, business is not bad. We might be downsizing. So if you were eligible to retire, a lot of people walked away. But the companies are still, the corporations are still here. They're still doing business. They're still functioning as if nothing was wrong financially for them. So we've got to find a way as a country to do things better and fairer to everyone. Thank you.
And the CEO still got at least six digit bonus last year in the midst of everything. But I'm going to stop you right there. I'm going to ask Charlie or Amy last comments.
Sure. Yes. To echo what several people have said, including Dan and Vince, I think that the origin is sort of a big lofty idea and probably one that's very appetizing to most people, like jobs, jobs, jobs. Everyone wants a job. I want a job. I want you to have a job. I want all my friends to have jobs. But when it comes to what happens next, the who's watching the watchers, that's not as sexy of a message. It's not as easy to understand. Once we got the jobs, people kind of figure, well, everything's okay. We can take our eye off the ball. So as we're talking about ways to improve, to Karen's point, ways to improve society, how can we make that interesting and sort of remind people this is something we should also be aware of. It doesn't just stop when the jobs are created. What type is it? Who's getting it? Is it a living wage? Is it, appropriate benefits and so on? I don't have an answer for that, but I think that surfacing that question as you do, and as we've talked about today is helpful.
All right, thank you, Amy. Charles, last thoughts.
Well, yeah, I'll try to make it brief here. When I think about corporations, I think about the history of them, and we can go back 100 years ago when the Standard Oil was a dominant entity in the country, and places like Sears and back in the day, Ford Motor Company were dominant. And I'm showing my age here a little bit, but I did not, and maybe because I was in a relatively small town growing up, I don't know, or where I was at the time, I did not have a view, understand, or have corporations like, certain places you would go eat or whatever, be a major part of my life till the 1980s. About the time, we'll say, Reagan became president. And I became more and more aware of that. I lived in the community, and there's a McDonald's and a Wendy's, and all that other stuff, and certain stores at the mall and things like that early in my life, most businesses were independent businesses owned by individuals within their own community. And for a large extent, that changed. And I find that very sad. And I've been a small business owner with my spouse and everything, and maybe some of you have as well, and it saddens me to do that because that takes the individual out of it and everything becomes a group. And that really saddens me. Can we stop it? I don't know. Like I said, they got 40 cards. So we got to get some of the cards out of their hands, and even if we're able to do it, it's going to take a long time.
Or bring our own deck of cards.
Well, or bring a new deck in.
Bring a new deck.
Start working on it, Kelvin.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Creativity.
Yes, sir. Well, that's about all, y'all, for this segment of Diverse Talking Heads. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs, and we've been talking about corporate welfare. If you like this episode, please hit like in the box, or if you want to leave a comment, please enter it in the chat box. Until next time, we will see you at the next episode, and goodbye.